Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby. I'm the host, Zibby Owens. I am an author. My latest is Blank, pub date March 1st, a novel. I'm also a podcaster, obviously, a publisher, a bookstore owner, and so much more. If you love books, you're in the right place. In fact, we call it the Zibbyverse, or really, the LA Times called it the Zibbyverse, and we're going with it. Go to zibbyowens.com to learn more and follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens. Carola Lovering is the author of Bye Baby, a novel. Carola is the author of the novels Tell Me Lies, Too Good to Be True, Can't Look Away, and now Bye Baby. She's a graduate of Colorado College, and her work has appeared in The Cut, Vogue, Marie Claire, W Magazine, National Geographic, Outside, and Yoga Journal, among other publications. Her novel Tell Me Lies has been adapted into a television series for Hulu. She lives in Connecticut with her husband and 2 young children. Welcome, Carola. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Bye Baby, a novel.
Thank you so much for having me, Zibby. I am such a giant fan of this podcast. It's very surreal to be on here. I honestly listen to this all the time, so I'm super honored.
That's really exciting. Well, your book kept me up so late when I was reading it. I could not stop reading it. My husband's like, okay, enough. And I'm like, just don't talk to me right now. Don't talk to me. I really got so engrossed and got totally just into the lives of these characters and haunted by Wade. And just like, I mean, it was just so vividly depicted and I didn't know how it was going to end. And anyway, so it was really fun.
Thank you. I love to hear that. It really means a lot. I always like to read books that keep me up at night. So It's a great endorsement. Thank you. Sorry to your husband.
No, it's okay. I don't read that many thrillers. I don't know why, or psychological suspense every so often. And then when I do, they like really get me, which is good, you know?
Yeah. And this is like, I wouldn't call it a thriller. So maybe this is a good, I don't know, entry point for you. It's like thriller light suspense.
Yeah. Yes. Suspense. It's like, that's why, as soon as the word thriller came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to call it a thriller because I don't know. Thrillers like, anyway. Okay. Why don't you tell listeners what Bye Baby is about?
Yes, of course. So Bye Baby is the story of a very complicated, ultimately toxic friendship between 2 women named Billie and Cassie. Billie and Cassie have been best friends for the majority of their lives until recently. So we meet them when they're in their mid-30s. They're both living in New York City, where the majority of the novel takes place. And over the past 2 or 3 years, they've begun to drift apart. Cassie has a brand new baby. She's newly married. She has a burgeoning career as a lifestyle and fashion influencer, and has this whole fancy set of new mom friends in Gramercy Park where they live. And Billie, on the contrary, is single, dating, child-free by choice, and she feels very pushed out by Cassie and Cassie's new priorities. So the catalyst for this book, it's not a spoiler, it happens on page 1. As you know, Cassie's infant daughter goes missing. And we, the reader, this happens at a party, and we, the reader, learn, unbeknown to Cassie, that Billie is responsible for the kidnapping. And from there, the novel goes back in time in 2 different timelines. So the first timeline starts about 6 weeks earlier and tells the story of the events that have led to the kidnapping in recent weeks. And the second timeline goes back much further to the early aughts when Cassie and Billie first meet in middle school in their Hudson Valley hometown. And this timeline tells the story of their friendship over the years. So it's definitely a suspense. And I also see it as a meditation on female friendship and how friendships change and evolve as the people in them change and evolve.
Yes. Well, you definitely got to the heart of the complications embedded when you're jealous of somebody a little bit or your lives seem to go. And I feel like Cassie's life has exploded, right? Like she's up to almost 50,000 followers and Cassie has a great job, but she's just not that, it's not the same, right? Her travel stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a point, and I don't know, kind of related to this because sometimes I post and I like don't do my emails or texts. And it's like, why do I not text people back when I have time to like post the longest caption possible on Instagram? Like literally, like obviously I could have chosen to spend my time differently, but I didn't. But there's a lot of that where like, just because she has a baby and she's on Instagram, like she doesn't have time to text me back. Like, what do you mean? So she feels, Billie feels just so not important anymore. And so then she just keeps watching and hoping. And I don't know, it felt very raw.
Yes, no, totally. And I've definitely experienced that too, where I'll post something on Instagram and then realize that, I haven't answered someone's text. And like, at this point, I think it's okay. I think that, we can't like be doing everything all at once. And if you have a job where you need to post on social media, like that's part of work.
Yes,
and,
yes.
So that's what it's like for Cassie. But yes, I think, I wanted to make her an influencer partly because I wanted Billie to have this window into her life, which is in this very like strange time that we live in now, where you might not talk to somebody, but you can, if they're active on social media in any way, but obviously Cassie is in a big way. It's her career, a friend can always see what you're up to. And I think that it lent itself to some of the suspense in the book. And yeah, it was fun to write her as an influencer for sure.
I feel like then there's the moment at the party when the detective is asking, like, would anyone have known where you are and what you're doing? It's like, yeah, like 50,000 people knew what I was doing and exactly where is what she said. And it's like, you're like, oh my gosh, it could have been anywhere. And then you're thinking to yourself reading, or I was like, why would anyone do that? And then I'm like, why do I do that? like this is so stupid. Yeah. I should not, but we all, now it's so normal. Like, oh, yeah, having fun at blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
I know. Totally. Yeah. And it was obviously like, that scene is, and the kidnapping element is very extreme, and it's a plot device that's used to engender the suspense, but it isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility for anyone who's posting online for something creepy like that to happen.
Yeah. Well, now everyone in the world will be afraid to post. What happened to
Probably
Instagram?
Not.
Well, there was this Carola Lovering book that came out in 2024, whenever it is, 2024. Yeah.
I think I'm powerless against the force of Instagram.
But what was I know you talked about some inspiration for these characters and everything. Was there a relationship in your life or a friend or anything that came from a personal place that found its way into the book or that inspired pieces of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that this book, second to Tell Me Lies, is the most personal book I've written. Not in a super specific way. Like there wasn't one friend I was thinking of when I was writing, but more just the general theme of getting older and, being really solidified in adulthood and finding that you're growing apart from people that you never imagined you'd grow apart from. I think that, that's for me been a big part of my 30s. I'm 35 and I started writing this book when I was in my earlier 30s. And it was a time when all of these feelings about friendship were kind of right underneath the surface for me. And it felt really accessible to write this story. I think that you get to a certain point and realize that not every friendship is going to grow with you, just like you can't grow with every friend. And along the way, like, unfortunately, some friendships are going to drift apart, and that's part of life, but there's a lot of pain involved, and there's a lot of complicated emotions and confusion. And I definitely feel like I have been both Cassie and Billie, which was a really interesting part of writing this book, because I've always written multi-POVs in my novels, but this was the first one where I really identified equally with both main characters. Like usually there's one person that I'm more drawn to in terms of like identifying with them, but here I really felt split between, like, I got Billie's perspective. I have been the scorned friend who like feels left out by somebody that she's been close with for a long time and can't get a text back. And that's really hard and confusing. And then on the other hand, I've experienced some of Cassie's feelings, which arguably are a little more complicated because, Cassie is in the position which I've definitely been in, of needing to set boundaries with a friend. And that's not easy. And there's guilt involved, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's equally hard, but it's just, there's pain on both sides. And I've definitely experienced that. So yeah, this book was really cathartic to write. Actually, there were some scenes when I felt like I was journaling, and it was great. I always find that, like, when I'm writing a book that feels more personal to me, it's so much easier.
Well, I feel like you can tell sometimes when you're reading if somebody really cares. Like,
oh yeah, you can totally tell.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it definitely makes for a better experience for both the author and the reader. So it's like, why force it? If you're not loving it.
I mean,
no one else
definitely
will.
went to some pretty extreme places. I mean, I think that both characters are unlikable. So I definitely don't, I don't think of myself as being as ruthless as Cassie, but I think that there's something I hope that there's something to relate to from a range of angles for readers.
Totally. Tell me more about becoming a novelist in general. And were you into writing as a kid? And where did this all come from? And when did you know you could kind of do this as a career and all of that?
Yeah. So I feel like my answer is kind of different. I always loved writing, but I never set out to be a novelist, really. It sort of found me. I was in my 20s and I was I had majored in English and had always loved writing and reading. And I had wanted to go into book or magazine publishing after graduation. But at the time, those jobs were just so few and far between. I didn't get any of them. And the first job that I got was in PR, but I didn't love it. And I wanted to do something more creative. And I had started freelance writing a little bit for publications like Elite Daily and Thought Catalog. I don't know if you remember Thought Catalog. Mm-hmm. It was big back in, 2013. And at the time I was in the aftermath of this toxic relationship that I had been through in college and for a couple of years afterwards. That was the inspiration for Tell Me Lies. And I had a ton of unresolved feelings over that experience, that a close friend of mine, she made the suggestion. She was like, I know you're trying to write more. Why don't you try to write about this toxic relationship? And so I was really inspired by that. And I started to do that and just gained momentum and really loved it, and decided that I wanted to try to turn it into a novel. And so that was really how I started writing novels. I had never written creatively before that. And yeah, I worked on that book kind of on the side of my day job for a few years. And then I got a lot of rejection, pitched a lot of agents, got a lot of no's, but then finally found my agent and my editor. And this is now my career. And I feel so lucky to be able to do it. I love it more than anything.
Oh my gosh. So tell people who don't know Tell Me Lies, tell them about that, but don't lie about it.
Don't lie about it. Well, Tell Me Lies is my debut novel, which came out in 2018 and is now a Hulu show, which is the most surreal thing in the world.
What is that like?
Really, I still can't believe it. It's it doesn't feel, I feel like I'm listening to someone else say that when I say that. It's really crazy. I feel very, very lucky that it made it onto the screen for so many reasons. But that is the first book that I wrote, and it's inspired by, it's very much fiction, but it's inspired loosely by an experience that I went through in college in a toxic relationship. And it's kind of about that relationship that you shouldn't be in, but you can't get out of. Mm-hmm. And it goes on and on for too long.
Oh, I thought you meant the book. I was like, what?
Hopefully not the book. The relationship.
Yeah.
Yes, hopefully not the book. And yeah, there's a little bit of a suspense element and tell me lies as well, which is sort of how I got onto the suspense train in my writing. And yeah, so now it's a season on Hulu, and they're hopefully soon starting to film season 2.
Wow. That's so cool. Good for you. Really
Thank
awesome.
you.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. I feel very blessed.
Wow. Well, Bye Baby, it's not just about Billie and Cassie. I mean, there are all these supporting characters who play big roles too. It's also, what's her name? Mary Kay or Carrie Ann? What's her name? Mary Kay. McKay. Sorry. McKay plays a role, and so do supporting characters like the mom who has early onset Alzheimer's, which is so sad, and which you did a really beautiful job writing about. This author who we've been sort of touring lately and who I've been spending a ton of time with, Emma Gray. Her mother died of, dementia, and she had to witness that. And the way you wrote about it is so similar to the way she's been talking about it at all these events, and just, it felt very, very real. Have you experienced that, or did you read about it? Or because the way you wrote about it seems to be, from what I keep hearing, very on point.
Thank you. I actually just listened to your episode with Emma Gray.
Oh, you did?
Yes. And her book sounds so good. I need to get it. It sounds amazing.
I'll send it to you.
I know it's a Zibby book. Oh, I would love that.
Okay.
And yeah, no, I haven't experienced that. So thank you for saying that I'm glad that it felt real. No, I haven't experienced that. I mean, my grandfather had dementia, but it wasn't like, I don't know, I wasn't really close.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't seeing it super close up. I did some research on it and read about it. And yeah, it was heartbreaking to write, just imagining that. And it's so hard. I can't imagine going through that, but it's common, obviously. And as people get older. And so I wanted Billie to really have like real trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give any spoilers, but I wanted her to have a real trauma bond to Cassie and kind of show that that's why she can't let go and they're so ingrained in each other's lives. I was also really, for the past chapters, I was so inspired by The Paper Palace.
Oh, love that book.
Which is like one of my favorite books. And I remember I had just started reading it when I sat down to write Bye Baby. And it's really what made me want to like have those past chapter flashbacks. And I know she doesn't touch on like dementia specifically, but I feel like in that book, there's just so much that happens to the character in her backstory that really kind of solidifies her trauma. And I was really inspired by that.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that book. I read it right before, like my podcast was before Pub. And I remember reading it and being like, okay, if this book doesn't do well, like I quit. Do you know what I mean? Like this book is so good.
It's so good. I keep waiting for her to come out with something else.
I know. That would be great.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What other types of books do you like to read in your spare time?
Well, I'm a very slow reader, especially right now. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and
Aww.
It really just does not, it prohibits my reading time. But I do like to read suspense, sometimes thrillers, but I would say more books that are kind of light thrillers, suspense, and a little bit more literary. Like I like to read lit fic too. And honestly, like just any books that are being highly recommended to me by people that I know I share taste with is kind of like where I gravitate. But my list is so long of books that I want to read.
So when you were writing this book, did you have any kids, or was it before? It must have been you had a baby, or what was that like?
I had my first baby, and that actually is like kind of was a whole nother element that played into some of the content in this book, was like me being a new mom and feeling, the range of emotions and the isolation and the intrusive thoughts that Cassie feels. Like that was all kind of playing around in my head too. My son had just turned 1 at the time that I started writing this. And so I wrote this book, like he was born in 2020 during COVID. We didn't have any childcare for a full year because it was COVID. And then when he turned 1, we got a part-time nanny, and I was like, I'm going to start working on something new. And so I wrote it during like from when he was 1 to age 2. And then I got pregnant like halfway through the writing process, and I finished the book right before my daughter was born. So I wrote it with 1 child, and now I'm trying to write something with 2 kids. And that feels like a whole, like writing with 1 child felt much more manageable to me than trying to write with 2 children. I know you have 4 kids, so that's a whole nother conversation. I don't know how you do it.
They're older.
But
they're much older now. I mean, my twins are 16 and a half, which sounds crazy. My daughter's been reminding me that she's going to be 17 on her next birthday, which is like a joke because she's still
my gosh,
put her socks away. And like, anyway, and then my little guys aren't even so little. They're 9 and 10. So,
yeah,
like take care of themselves. Not that they're not not that they don't want attention, but also iPads, friends, they do their own thing.
Totally. Yep. The TV is on in our house, probably too much, but it's okay.
I just feel like at 1 and 3 though, like you're so in it yourself emotionally, like it's not, and the sleep is so affected. Like with older kids, they need you, but it's not like you're like in full on trenches at the moment. Like this is deep trench territory.
Very in the trenches. Yeah. And I remind myself of that. And I know it's not always going to be like that. And there are so many precious moments, and I know they're fleeting. I want to appreciate all of it, but it is hard. And I was actually talking to a writer friend about this a couple days ago. Like and what you were saying, like the mental piece is hard for writing because writing requires, a lot of mental space and clarity. And when you have little kids, you can't really have that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, when I'm working on a novel, it's important to not just be sitting at my computer, but also taking walks and thinking. And, I like to go to yoga and think, but I don't really get to do that stuff very often anymore. And so I often find I'm just trying to get my words in every day. And I'm like, is this book going to be terrible? It's just you doubt yourself. And I'm like, I feel like I'm not in the environment right now that I need to be in to do my best work, but you just have to do it anyway. So, and whatever is created during this time will be like, I don't know, like what I'm going through will somehow make its way into my work, and it'll be its own, like, that's how I feel about Tell Me Lies. I wrote that book at such a specific time in my life when I was going through such a hard time. And I look back on it and I'm like, I could obviously never have written that now. I wrote it when I was in this place when I was like in my mid-20s and really going through something, and it captures a moment in time that now, even though I couldn't recreate that, I appreciate it for what it is.
But isn't it kind of neat that as you get older, I mean, there's always new material and your audience is aging at the exact same pace as you. Maybe their life events aren't the same, but it's like once you start with one life, next thing you know, you'll be writing about high school, and the same readers will still be coming along for the ride. So you have to put the stuff of of daily life. I don't know. I say like lean into the chaos, like make the chapters like, as disjointed, or like, what was I saying? Or the baby, like the toddler just knocked this out of my, like so-and-so couldn't think because this just happened. I don't know. I think like lean into it because we've all been there, or not all of us, but those who have had kids have been there and totally remember and relate. So instead, use it. I don't know.
Absolutely. And like, I'm not writing fantasy or anything. I'm very much writing novel. Like I'm writing what I know. What I know is going right into the book. So
do you have anything you can share about the book you're writing now, aside from the difficulty you're having writing it?
Aside from the fact that it's very slow.
You think it's terrible?
It could be terrible. I don't know. Time will tell. No one has read it yet. I've only written like probably a third of it. And my agent and editor are actually both on maternity leave right now. So neither of them even have like a clue of what it's about. So I can't share too much in case it changes, but I will say that it's the darkest book I've ever written. I don't really know why that's coming out right now, but it is. And it's about motherhood.
So weird because it's such a happy time in the world. It's curious why you would ever write anything dark.
So curious. Yeah, I wonder, and it's December.
Yeah, right? I mean,
darkest time of year. Yeah, I know. I feel badly because my editor and agent both just had babies and I'm writing this book about dark motherhood. And I feel like I'm going to terrify both of them.
Your editor and agent are going to have to put double locks on their doors.
Yes.
Doors and window locks and, you never know what you're going to do.
Yes.
Occupational hazard.
Well, I warn friends, I have some friends that just had their first babies and I have to warn them about Bye Baby. I'm like, just so you know, I don't want this book to be triggering for you. There is an infant that is kidnapped, but no spoilers, but it doesn't get as bad as you think. So
it's not triggering. It's good. Sometimes you need the jolt of feeling to get out of the daily grind. I don't know. I think that's good. You want to feel like that, oh my God, that terror that you feel. I think it's good to feel.
Yeah, right. And that moment where, I feel like it happens to me all the time where I'm like, oh my God, where is my child? I just put them somewhere. I have a 1-year-old, she's not walking yet. And I feel like I put her down and then I go do something and I come back and I'm like, where is she?
Yeah.
And you just are your mind goes to the worst.
I was so sure when I just hosted this birthday party, when one of the parents came to pick up the kids and he couldn't find her, I was like, oh my God, I think I lost a kid. Oh my gosh, what would happen then? What if she doesn't turn up? Where is she? Anyway, lots of fodder for future novels. She turned up. Yeah, she turned up.
Yeah.
Anyway, Carola, congratulations. This was great. Probably another Hulu show in the making. Really awesome. And thank you for coming on. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much, Zibby. This was so much fun. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Pleasure. All right. Good luck.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.